There's a prison you built with your own hands, brick by brick, every time you chose silence when you should have screamed, every time you looked away when you should have stared. And the cruelest part? You don't even realize you're trapped. Because this prison has no visible bars. It's made of conversations not started, truths not spoken, confrontations postponed. Nietzsche had a name for this: cowardice disguised as peace. Think with me. How many times today did you swallow something you wanted to say? How many times this week did you let a small injustice pass, a subtle disrespect, an invaded boundary? But you had your reasons, right? You didn't want to create problems. It wasn't the right moment. The person wouldn't understand anyway. You thought you were being mature, civilized, evolved. But Nietzsche whispers a disturbing truth in your ear. You weren't being peaceful. You were being a coward. And worse, you were becoming smaller. Because here's the secret nobody tells you. You're not defined by the big decisions you make once a year. You're sculpted by the micro-cowardices you practice every day. Each avoided conflict is a piece of yourself that you gift away to avoid feeling 5 minutes of discomfort. It's a terrible bargain. You trade fragments of your soul for moments of false harmony, and in the end, you look in the mirror and don't recognize who's there anymore. Of course you don't recognize them. That person was being diluted, negotiated, erased, not all at once, but drop by drop. Avoided conflict by avoided conflict. Let's go deeper. Nietzsche observed something fascinating about human nature. We don't become weak suddenly. Weakness is a process. It's a slow erosion. Every time you choose temporary comfort instead of necessary truth, you strengthen the wrong muscle, the muscle of submission, the muscle of self-betrayal. And like any muscle you train repeatedly, it grows. It becomes your default response, until one day you realize you can no longer say no, you can no longer defend your ideas, you can no longer exist fully because you spent so much time existing halfway that you forgot what it's like to be whole. The average of your avoided conflicts is who you've become. If you add up all the times you retreated when you should have advanced, all the times you smiled when you should have frowned, all the times you agreed when every cell in your body disagreed, you have a number. And that number is you. Not the version you imagine yourself to be, not the version you tell your friends about, but the real version, the version that lives, breathes, decides, the coward version. And this hurts to hear, I know, but it needs to hurt. Because only what hurts enough has the power to wake you up. Nietzsche spoke of the Overman, the Übermensch. But before understanding what it means to be more, we need to understand what it means to be less. And being less is exactly this. It's the sum of all your silent surrenders. You know that relationship where you don't say what you really feel. That job where you accept being disrespected because you need the salary. That friendship where you're always the one who yields. Each of these situations is a mirror, and the reflection doesn't lie. It shows someone who chose the illusion of peace instead of the dignity of necessary conflict. But why do we do this? Why do we choose to diminish ourselves? Because someone, at some point, taught us that conflict is bad, that good people don't fight, that harmony is always preferable to truth, that being liked is more important than being respected. And we believed it. We bought this lie wrapped in cheap self-help wisdom. We became experts at avoiding discomfort, masters of evasion, doctors in swallowing frogs. And we call this maturity, emotional intelligence, wisdom, when in reality it's just fear with a pretty name. Look, there's a brutal difference between choosing your battles and avoiding all of them. Choosing battles is strategy, it's wisdom, it's power. But avoiding conflict by default, out of fear, out of habit, that's abdication. It's you telling the universe, you can use me, you can disrespect me, you can ignore me, because I won't do anything. I'll smile, I'll understand, I'll be reasonable. And the universe, which isn't foolish, accepts the offer and uses you, disrespects you, ignores you, and you're left wondering why your life feels so small, so flavorless, so without you. If this idea has already resonated with you, If you've already felt that tightness in your chest, recognizing your own evasions, imagine what comes next, because this is just the beginning of this journey. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next revelations that could completely change how you see yourself and position yourself in the world. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Nietzsche had a view on conflict that our modern society hates. He said that conflict is not the opposite of peace. Conflict is the path to true peace, because false peace, the one you build by avoiding everything, is just a postponed war. It's an emotional time bomb. You didn't resolve anything, you just swept it under the rug. And under the rug is already so full it started to stink. Do you smell it? That unexplainable anxiety, that anger that appears out of nowhere, that sadness you can't name. It's the smell of your authenticity rotting under the rug of avoided conflicts. True peace only comes after war, after you said what needed to be said, after you defended what needed to be defended, after you fought for your dignity. Then yes, there can be peace, real peace. Peace that doesn't need mental gymnastics to sustain itself. Peace that doesn't require you to be less to exist. Think about the people you admire most. Not the fake celebrities on social media, but the real people you know and deeply respect. They have something in common. They don't avoid conflict. They're not aggressive, not quarrelsome, but they have clear boundaries. They have their own opinions. They know how to say no. And because of that, when they say yes, it means something. When they offer peace, it's true peace. It's not the disguised surrender you call peace. It's the peace that comes after honesty, after courage. Do you want to be that person? Then you need to stop telling yourself the story that avoiding conflict makes you noble. It doesn't. It makes you invisible. It makes you irrelevant. It makes you safe, perhaps. But safety isn't life. Safety is survival. And you didn't come this far, didn't cross millions of years of evolution, didn't gain this unique moment of consciousness in this vast universe just to survive. You came to live, to exist fully, to leave your mark. And marks aren't made by people who agree with everything, but there's an even deeper secret that few know, a layer beyond all this. Nietzsche noticed that when you avoid external conflict, you create internal conflict. It's a law of conservation of tension. The tension doesn't disappear. It moves, it migrates, it goes from outside to inside. So you avoid the discussion with your boss, but spend the whole night having the discussion in your head. You avoid the confrontation with your partner, but develop a silent war with yourself. You avoid defending your position in the world, but create an internal battle between who you are and who you pretend to be. And here's the cruel irony. Internal conflict is 1,000 times more destructive than external conflict. External conflict has a beginning, middle, and end. You argue, resolve, or don't resolve, but it ends. Internal conflict? That never ends. It stays there, consuming you from the inside out, turning into anxiety, turning into depression, turning into psychosomatic illnesses. Your body literally gets sick from so much unresolved conflict, from so much unsaid you, from so much swallowed truth. Modern psychologists confirm what Nietzsche already knew. The incongruence between who you are and how you act is the primary source of psychological suffering. When you live a life that doesn't reflect your values because you fear the conflict that will come if you're authentic, you create a fracture in your psyche. And that fracture keeps growing, keeps deepening, until one day you have a breakdown and don't understand why. I'll tell you why, because you spent years building an entire life based on avoided conflicts, and that foundation can't hold. It cracks, it crumbles. So what to do? How to escape this prison you built yourself? First, recognize that the door was always open. You're not trapped by external forces. You're trapped by fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being judged, fear of losing. But here's the liberating truth. You're already losing. You're already losing the most precious thing you have, yourself. So what exactly do you have to lose that's more valuable than that? Start small. This week, choose one conflict you would normally avoid and face it. It doesn't have to be a war. It can just be an honest conversation. It can just be a no that you would normally turn into a yes. It can just be an opinion you would normally keep to yourself. Do this and observe. Observe how the world didn't end. Observe how you feel afterward. There's a lightness that comes from living in alignment, a peace that needs no excuses, and then do it again, and again, and again, until living in truth becomes your default, until saying what needs to be said becomes your nature, until you no longer need to think about it, you just are. Authentic, whole, present, not fragmented among 1,000 false versions of yourself that you created to please people who don't really care about you anyway. Nietzsche said you must become who you are. But how can you become who you are if you're too busy being who others need you to be? How can you discover your essence if you're hidden behind layers and layers of avoided conflicts? You can't. It's impossible. Authenticity requires courage, and courage requires conflict, not conflict for conflict's sake, but conflict in service of truth, conflict as a tool of liberation. Here's the climax of this revelation. Every conflict you avoid, you're avoiding a truer version of yourself. Every time you retreat, you're retreating from who you could be. The person you have the potential to be is on the other side of conflict, waiting, but you need to cross over. You need to go through the discomfort, the tension, the possibility of loss, because on the other side isn't just the resolution of the specific situation. On the other side is you, the real you, the whole you, the you who doesn't need masks because you're not afraid to be seen. You want to know what freedom is? Freedom isn't doing what you want. Freedom is being who you are without fear of the consequences. It's living in such alignment with your truth that others' opinions become irrelevant, not because you're arrogant, but because you're complete, because you're no longer begging for approval, because you're no longer negotiating pieces of yourself for moments of temporary acceptance. So look at your life now. Look honestly. Where are you being cowardly and calling it mature? Where are you diminishing yourself and calling it flexible? Where are you betraying yourself and calling it love? These questions hurt. They should hurt, because truth hurts before it liberates. But it does liberate. It always liberates. You are the average of your avoided conflicts. But this isn't a sentence. It's a diagnosis. And every diagnosis is the first step toward healing. Now you know. Now you see. The question is, what are you going to do with this awareness? Will you continue avoiding and diminishing? Or will you start facing and growing? Because between you and your best version exists only one thing, the courage to enter into conflict with everything that keeps you small. Don't be the average of your avoided conflicts. Be the sum of your exercised courages. Be the result of your spoken truths. Be the consequence of your lived authenticity. This is being human. This is living. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of affirming life. Affirm your life. But you can't affirm what you don't live. You can't live what you don't defend. You can't defend what you don't face. Conflict is not your enemy. Conflict is your path back to yourself. If this video touched something in you, if you felt this truth resonating like this content, share it with someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe to the channel, because this journey of self-knowledge and transformation is just beginning. In the comments, tell me, what conflict have you been avoiding and are you ready to finally face? Until the next video, until the next truth.